Her armor fell, the battle was lost. Until a human restored the armor from the ship's wreckage, the sky above the broken world was dark with smoke and burning clouds. Pieces of ships fell from the air like dying stars, cutting bright lines before crashing into the ground. The battle had ended, but the noise had not. Fires still burned, weapons still sparked. The ground shook from distant explosions as enemy forces secured what was left of the field. Veltir lay on her side among shattered metal and scorched stone. Her armor, once shining and alive with power, was silent and cracked open across her chest and back. Thin streams of smoke rose from it. The armor had protected her for decades of war. It had been grown, bonded, and shaped for her body alone. It carried her history, her rank, and her honor. Now it was broken, just like the army she had led. She tried to move her arm. Pain spread through her body, sharp and heavy. Without the armor's support systems, every breath felt difficult. The battlefield around her was filled with the bodies of her soldiers. Some still moved, crawling or calling out. Most did not. The enemy had been stronger, better prepared, and ruthless. They had learned how to break her people's tactics. They had waited for the right moment and struck without mercy. Veltir forced herself to lift her head. Through blurred vision, she saw enemy walkers moving across the field, tall and mechanical, scanning for survivors. They would find her soon. Her armor was dead. Her weapons were gone. Her people had lost. She felt shame not for herself, but for failing those who had trusted her. As a champion of her species, she had sworn to protect them. The armor was a symbol of that promise. Losing it meant more than losing a battle. It meant she would be remembered as the one who fell. A nearby explosion sent dirt and metal across the ground. Something large had crashed not far away. Veltir turned her head slightly and saw the wreckage of a small ship burning in the distance. It was not one she recognized. The shape was wrong, rough, and uneven. Human-made. Humans were strange allies. They were new to the wider galaxy and had not fully learned the rules that others followed. They repaired things instead of honoring their end. They modified sacred technology without asking permission. They fought in ways that were messy and unpredictable. Veltir had fought beside them once, long ago. They had been loud, stubborn, and impossible to scare. She wondered if anyone had survived that crash. It did not matter. Even if a human lived, they could not help her now. No one could repair armor like hers in the middle of a battlefield. Her people believed such things were impossible. The enemy walkers moved closer. Their sensors swept the area, cold and patient. Veltir closed her eyes. She prepared herself for capture or death. Either way, the war would continue without her. Then she heard something unexpected. Footsteps. Not the heavy sound of enemy machines, but lighter, uneven steps. Someone was running, stopping, then running again. Veltir opened her eyes and turned her head as much as she could. A figure moved through the smoke, smaller than her people. Wrapped in a damaged pressure suit, helmet cracked, one arm bleeding. Human. He stumbled, nearly falling as another explosion shook the ground. He swore loudly, his voice sharp and full of anger rather than fear. In one hand, he carried a small tool kit. In the other, a weapon that looked poorly maintained but ready to fire. The human saw her. For a moment, he froze. His helmet visor reflected the firelight as he took in her size, her broken armor, and the enemy machines in the distance. Veltir expected him to turn and run. Any sane being would. Instead, he walked toward her. He moved quickly, crouching beside her and scanning her armor with a small handheld device. His movements were fast and focused. He spoke, though she was not sure if he expected her to understand. Armor S down, power core ruptured, that's bad, that's really bad. She tried to speak but could only manage a weak sound. The human noticed and leaned closer. Easy, don't try to move, I'm not exactly a medic, but I've seen worse. He glanced back toward the burning wreck of his ship, then toward the approaching enemy walkers. His jaw tightened. I should leave, he muttered. I really should. He did not leave. Instead, he stood and ran back toward the wreckage. Veltir watched in confusion as he disappeared into smoke and flame. She did not understand his choice. Humans were not bound to her people. They owed her nothing. Minutes passed. Each second felt heavy. The walkers were closer now. Veltir could hear their engines and the hum of their weapons charging. She prepared herself again, gathering what little strength she had left. The human returned, dragging a piece of metal nearly as large as himself. It was part of his ship, torn free in the crash. Cables hung from it, sparking and glowing. He dropped it beside her and immediately began working, pulling out tools and opening panels on her armor without hesitation. What are you doing? she asked weakly, her voice rough. He looked up, surprised that she had spoken. "Fixing it," he said simply. "You cannot," she replied. "It is not possible," he snorted. "People say that a lot." Enemy fire struck the ground nearby, dirt sprayed over them. The human flinched but kept working, cutting away damaged sections of her armor and exposing systems that had never been seen by non-members of her species. "This is sacred," Valtir said, more out of habit than anger. "So is staying alive," the human replied. "I'm choosing the second one." He connected cables from his ship's wreckage directly into her armor's core. Warning lights flashed. Systems tried to shut down. The armor resisted him, rejecting the foreign power source. "Come on," he growled. "Don't be like that." He rewired connections by hand, ignoring sparks that burned his gloves. He bypassed safety systems, forced manual overrides, and fed power into the armor in short, controlled bursts. Valtir felt it. A faint warmth spread through the armor, weak but real. Internal systems flickered. Pain lessened slightly as support fields struggled to re-engage. Her eyes widened. "Stop," she said. "If you fail, it will destroy what remains." "If I don't try, you die," the human said. "I don't like those odds." The walkers opened fire. Energy bolts struck the ground around them, sending cracks through the stone. The human cursed and pressed a final command into a makeshift control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the armor responded. Light flowed through the cracks, not the soft glow it once had, but something sharper, stronger. The armor plates shifted, locking into place. Systems came online one by one, imperfect but functional. Valtir gasped as strength returned to her limbs. The armor was damaged, changed, but alive. The human leaned back, breathing hard, a wild smile on his face. "See, told you." The battle was not over. The enemy was still there, but something had changed. Valtir pushed herself up, slowly at first, then faster as the armor adjusted. She stood, towering over the human, who looked up at her with exhaustion and relief. The enemy walkers paused. Their sensors recalculated. What they had marked as defeated was standing again. Valtir looked down at the human. "You should have left," she said. He shook his head. "Nah, didn't feel right." She turned to face the enemy, armor humming with unstable but powerful energy. The battle had been lost. Valtir did not charge forward right away. She stood still for a moment, letting the damaged armor adjust to her body. The power flowing through it was uneven, rough, and far stronger than before. It did not feel like her armor anymore. It felt wild, almost angry. But it worked. The enemy walkers reacted first. Their weapons rose, tracking her movement. They had already marked her as defeated once, and their systems struggled to understand why she was standing again. That hesitation gave her time. "Stay behind me," Valtir said to the human without looking back. The human, Elias, scrambled to his feet and moved toward a chunk of fallen metal for cover. "Trust me, I have zero plans to be in front of you." The first energy bolt struck Valtir's chest. The armor flared bright, absorbing most of the force, but the impact still pushed her back a step. Warning signals filled her vision. Systems screamed about overloads and unstable power flow. She ignored them. She raised her arm, and the armor responded with a weapon she had not felt before. It was not one of her people's designs. It was rough, direct, and powerful. A focused blast of energy erupted from her gauntlet and tore through the nearest walker's leg. The machine collapsed, crashing into the ground. Elias let out a loud laugh from behind cover. "Yes, that's it. Hit the joints." Valtir did not know how he understood enemy designs so quickly, but she followed his advice. She moved forward step by heavy step, firing again and again. The armor struggled to keep up, but each shot landed harder than expected. Human power systems fed it without care for long-term damage. It was built to survive now, not later. Enemy fire intensified. Explosions tore up the battlefield. Valtir felt heat and shock ripple through her armor, but it held. Not cleanly, not elegantly, but stubbornly. The walkers began to retreat, adjusting their formation. They were not afraid, but they were cautious. Machines did not feel fear, but their creators had programmed them to respect unexpected threats. A loud crack echoed behind Valtir. She turned just in time to see enemy drones descending toward Elias' position. Small, fast, and armed. "No," she said sharply. She moved without thinking. The armor pushed beyond its limits, sending power where it should not go. She crossed the distance faster than she ever had before and placed herself between Elias and the drones. Energy tore through the air. One drone exploded. Another slammed into her shoulder, detonating on impact. The armor absorbed most of it, but systems flickered dangerously. Elias stared up at her, eyes wide behind his cracked visor. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Valtir replied. "I did." The remaining enemy forces pulled back, not far but enough. They had lost too many units too quickly. This battlefield was no longer secure. Silence slowly returned, broken only by fires and distant alarms. Valtir stood still, breathing heavily. The armor's power levels dropped suddenly, then stabilized at a lower state. It would not hold like this for long. Elias climbed out from behind cover, wincing as he favored his injured arm. He looked at her armor with open amazement. "I didn't think that would actually work," he said. "You altered a sacred system," Valtir replied. "You should not be alive." He shrugged. "I get that a lot." She turned her head slightly to look at him. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice softened. "You saved my life." "Yeah," he said. "Guess I did." They stood there for a moment, two survivors in the ruins of a lost battle. Then Valtir's armor flickered again, more violently this time. She staggered, catching herself with one hand. "That's bad," Elias said quickly. He stepped closer, scanning her systems with his device. "Power flow is unstable. Your armor is pulling more energy than it can safely handle." "Can it be fixed?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not like this, not out here." Enemy signals began to appear again on the edge of their sensors. The enemy had not left. They were regrouping. "We need to move," Elias said. "Now." Valtir looked across the battlefield at the fallen and the broken. Leaving felt wrong, but staying meant death. She nodded once. "Lead." Elias looked surprised. "Me? You understand this chaos better than I do," she said, "and you have already proven yourself." He swallowed, then nodded. "All right, follow me." They moved through wreckage and smoke, avoiding open ground. Elias guided them toward a narrow canyon formed by collapsed structures and natural rock. Enemy sensors struggled there. As they walked, Valtir studied him. Humans were physically weak compared to her people. Elias limped slightly, clearly injured, yet he never slowed his pace. His focus never broke. "Why did you return?" she asked. He did not answer right away. "Because you were still alive," he said finally, "and because everyone else would have said it was impossible." "That is not a reason," she said. He gave a tired smile. "It's a human one." They reached the canyon and slipped inside just as enemy patrols swept the area they had left behind. The narrow path hid them from view. Elias collapsed against the rock wall, breathing hard. "Okay, short break." Valtir stood watch, armor dimming as it conserved power. "My people believe armor is an extension of the self," she said. "By changing it, you have changed me." Elias looked up at her. "Is that bad?" She considered the question. "I do not know." The armor hummed softly, adapting, rewriting parts of itself around human systems. It was learning. After a short rest, Elias pushed himself up. "We need to find shelter, somewhere I can stabilize your armor and patch myself up." "Enemy forces will hunt us," Valtir said. "Yeah," he replied. "They always do." They moved deeper into the canyon, toward an old mining facility long abandoned. Inside, the walls were thick and the power systems were dead, but it offered protection. Elias set up what little equipment he had salvaged. He worked carefully now, reinforcing his earlier changes, smoothing energy flow, and adding crude safety limits. Valtir watched as he worked on her armor again without fear or hesitation. Each movement was confident, respectful in its own strange way. "You treat this as a machine," she said. "It is a machine," he replied, "a very impressive one." "It is more than that," she said. He nodded. "I believe you, but right now it also needs to not explode." Despite herself, Valtir made a quiet sound that might have been laughter. When he finished, the armor felt steadier, still changed, still rough, but alive. Outside, enemy signals moved closer. Elias sat back, exhausted. "They'll be here soon," Valtir straightened. "Then we will be ready." She looked at the human engineer, small but unbroken, and understood something new. Humanity did not win by being stronger. They won by refusing to stop. The mining facility was silent except for the soft hum of Valtir's armor and the slow drip of water from cracked pipes. Dust hung in the air, untouched for many years. The walls were thick stone and old metal, carved deep into the ground long before the war reached this world. Elias wiped sweat from his face and leaned back against a crate. His injured arm shook slightly, but he ignored it. Outside, faint signals moved closer. The enemy was searching carefully now, not rushing, not making mistakes. "They'll try to trap us," Elias said quietly. They always do after a surprise, Valtir nodded. Her armor showed enemy movements as red marks on a faded map of the area. They learn fast. So do humans, he replied. The armor shifted slightly as she moved. It no longer felt like a single smooth system. It felt layered, patched, and reinforced in strange ways. Parts of it responded faster than before. Other parts lagged but compensated. It was imperfect but strong. Suddenly, warning signals flashed. Small drones slipped into the outer tunnels, scanning silently. "They're here," Elias said. Valtir stepped forward. "Stay behind me." "Not happening," he replied. "If that armor goes down again, I need to see it." The first drone appeared at the tunnel entrance. Valtir raised her arm and fired. The blast destroyed it instantly, but the sound echoed loudly through the tunnels. More followed. They came in waves, fast and low. Valtir moved carefully, firing controlled shots, conserving power. The armor held steady, redirecting energy smoothly. Elias moved with her, calling out targets and weak points. "Left tunnel, ceiling." Valtir reacted instantly, striking a drone just before it dropped explosives. The explosion shook the tunnel, sending rocks crashing down. Enemy walkers could not enter the tunnels easily, but they waited outside, patient and calculating. "They're not pushing," Elias said. "They want us to burn out. They underestimate our endurance," Valtir replied. Hours passed in tense silence broken by sudden attacks. Each time, Valtir and Elias responded quickly, working together without needing many words. The armor adapted further, adjusting power flow based on Elias' changes. It learned human logic, redundancy, backup systems, survival above elegance. At one point, a heavy blast struck the outer wall, cracking stone and shaking the ground. "That's not good," Elias muttered. "They're bringing something bigger." Valtir closed her eyes briefly. "Then we leave." "Through where?" he asked. She turned toward a deeper tunnel, one marked on the old maps as collapsed. "There," Elias frowned. "That thing hasn't been used in decades." "Neither has this armor," she said. "Yet here we are." They moved quickly deeper into darkness. The tunnel was narrow, forcing Valtir to crouch. Her armor scraped against stone, sending sparks into the air. Behind them, the enemy advanced. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast underground chamber. Old mining machines lay broken and rusted. In the center stood a massive drilling rig, long dead but still standing. Elias' eyes lit up. "Oh, that could work." "What could?" Valtir asked. He ran toward the rig, scanning it with his device. "Power lines, mechanical arms, heavy shielding. If I can reroute energy from your armor into this thing." "You wish to weaponize it," she said. He grinned. "I wish to survive." Enemy units entered the chamber, their lights cutting through the darkness. Valtir took position near the rig, firing controlled shots to slow them down. Elias climbed the rig, ignoring pain, pulling open panels and connecting cables. Sparks flew as ancient systems woke up, screaming in protest. "Power's unstable," he shouted. "Just like your armor, perfect match." Valtir felt the armor respond as he linked it to the rig. Energy surged, but instead of overwhelming her, it flowed outward. The drilling rig roared to life. Massive arms swung, crushing enemy units. The drill spun, tearing through machines like paper. Enemy forces retreated, confused by the sudden resistance. Valtir moved with the rig, guiding it, protecting Elias as he worked. Together, they turned an abandoned machine into a weapon of survival. But the strain was too much. Warning signals screamed. The armor's core overheated. Cracks spread across its surface. "Elias," Valtir said sharply, "it will fail." "I know," he replied. "Give me 30 seconds. Enemy fire intensified. The rig slowed. One arm shattered under heavy fire. 10 seconds, Elias shouted. Valtir stepped forward, placing herself between the rig and the enemy. She absorbed blast after blast, her armor screaming in protest. The final connection locked. Elias jumped down. "Done, now move." Valtir turned and ran as the rig overloaded. A massive explosion filled the chamber, collapsing tunnels and burying enemy forces under tons of stone and metal. They were thrown forward, sliding across the ground. When the dust settled, silence returned once more. Valtir lay still, systems flickering. Elias crawled toward her, fear clear on his face. "Hey," he said, tapping her armor. "You still with me?" Slowly, the armor stabilized. Valtir opened her eyes and pushed herself up. "Yes," she said, "I am." They sat together in the darkness, surrounded by rubble and broken machines. Elias laughed weakly. "I can't believe that worked." Valtir looked at him. "You should." Enemy signals faded. The surviving forces pulled back, unable to reach them now. For the first time since the battle, there was real silence. Veltir studied her armor. It was scarred, cracked, and glowing faintly. It would never return to what it once was, but it was stronger in a different way. "My people will not understand this," she said. Elias shrugged. "Mine usually don't either." She looked at him, truly looked at him, a being so fragile yet so unwilling to give up. "You have changed the path of this war," she said. He shook his head. "I just fixed what was broken." She stood, armor humming steadily. "Sometimes that is enough." Together, they moved deeper into the ruins, not as commander and engineer, not as alien and human, but as survivors who refused to fall. The enemy believed the battle was finished. The ruins stretched far beneath the surface, older than the war and forgotten by most maps. Veltir moved carefully through the broken tunnels, her armor lighting the path ahead. Each step echoed softly. The air was cooler here, calmer, untouched by fire and smoke. Elias followed close behind, carrying what little equipment he still had. His arm hurt badly now, but he did not complain. He had learned that pain was something humans accepted and worked through. Stopping meant giving the enemy time. They found a wide chamber with thick walls and only two narrow entrances. Old support beams crossed the ceiling, strong enough to hold for a while. "This will do," Elias said. "If they find us, we'll know before they reach us." Veltir nodded and took position near one entrance. Her armor systems were quieter now, more balanced. The changes Elias made had settled into something stable, not perfect but reliable. For the first time since the battle began, they had time to breathe. Elias sat against the wall and began treating his injured arm. Veltir watched him silently. "You should rest," she said. "So should you," he replied. "I cannot," she said. "Not yet." Enemy signals were faint but present. They were searching again, slower this time, smarter. Elias finished wrapping his arm and looked up at her. "You keep saying my people believe and my people do this. What do you believe?" The question caught her off guard. "I believe," she said slowly, "that I was trained to fight and to wear this armor." "I believed that was enough. And now?" he asked. She looked down at her hands, the armor still faintly glowing. "Now I believe adaptation is strength," he smiled tiredly. "Welcome to the human mindset." A sudden vibration ran through the ground. Not an explosion, but something heavy moving above. "They've brought heavier units," Veltir said. Elias stood. "Then we stop thinking like they expect." He moved toward a control panel half buried in debris. The mining facility had emergency systems still connected to the surface. "If I can get this working," he said, "we can control sections of the tunnels, collapse paths, funnel them." Veltir watched as he worked, fingers flying across damaged controls. "You fight without facing your enemy." "Only when it makes sense," he replied. The panel flickered to life. Old systems groaned but responded. Enemy signals shifted suddenly, confused as tunnels collapsed and paths vanished. "They're separating," Elias said. "That's good for us." Veltir moved fast. She struck isolated units one by one, using narrow tunnels to limit their movement. The armor responded smoothly now, power flowing where needed, cutting off excess where it was. The enemy adapted quickly, but not quickly enough. At one point, a heavy unit forced its way through a weakened wall, emerging directly in front of Veltir. It was larger than anything they had faced so far, heavily armored and armed. Elias shouted from behind cover. "That thing's a problem." Veltir stepped forward without hesitation. The armor surged, feeding power into her limbs. She struck the unit's joint with precise force, cracking its armor. The machine responded with a powerful blast that sent her crashing into the wall. Pain flared, but the armor held. She rose again. The enemy unit hesitated. It recalculated. It could not understand why she kept standing. Veltir charged. She used everything the armor had learned from human systems: overload tolerance, brute force, direct impact. She tore the unit apart piece by piece. When it finally fell, the tunnels were silent again. Elias stared at the wreckage. "That was intense." Veltir looked at her damaged armor. "This armor no longer fights with honor alone." He nodded. "Honor's great. Survival keeps you alive." They regrouped deeper in the facility. Enemy signals began to fade again. Losses were too high. The enemy command withdrew their remaining units to reassess. For the first time, they were not being hunted. Veltir felt something unfamiliar: hope. Elias sat beside her, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "You know," he said, "if your people see that armor, they might not like what we did to it." "They may not," she agreed, But they will see that it works. He looked at her. What happens when this fight is over? She considered the question. Then I will speak for humanity. He raised an eyebrow. I'm not sure my people are ready for that. She allowed herself a small smile. They already are. Suddenly, a new signal appeared on their sensors, friendly, coalition forces. They found us, Elias said, relief clear in his voice. Veltir stood tall, armor humming steadily. Then the battle truly changes. Hours later, coalition troops reached the mining facility. They stopped when they saw Veltir's armor altered and glowing in unfamiliar ways. Whispers spread quickly. What happened to her armor? That is human work. Veltir stepped forward, her voice calm and strong. This armor fell, the battle was lost, a human refused to accept that. She looked back at Elias, standing quietly behind her. Because of him, we stand here. The coalition commanders listened. They studied the armor, they studied the human, and slowly their understanding shifted. The enemy had believed the battle was won. They had believed breaking armor meant breaking spirit. Humanity had proven them wrong. As coalition forces prepared to push back, Veltir felt the armor settle fully into place. It was no longer just hers. It was a symbol, not of perfection, but of refusal to surrender. The coalition camp spread across the ruined valley as night slowly returned to the sky. Lights rose where fires once burned. Medical units moved among the wounded. Engineers repaired what could still be saved. The battlefield that had been silent now lived again with quiet purpose. Veltir stood at the center of it, watching. Her armor drew attention everywhere she turned. Coalition soldiers stopped to stare, not in fear but in disbelief. They had seen her fall. They had seen the battle lost. Yet here she was, standing taller than before, her armor glowing with unfamiliar strength. Elias stood a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, trying very hard not to look important. Coalition commanders approached, their expressions serious. They studied Veltir, then her armor, then finally the human. This armor, one commander said carefully, has been altered beyond approved limits. Veltir did not move. It has been altered beyond defeat. The commander hesitated. Human methods are risky. Elias spoke up, his voice calm. So was losing. Silence followed. Then slowly the commander nodded. Enemy signals appeared on the far edge of the valley. The enemy had regrouped faster than expected. Their forces were larger now, more cautious, forming strong lines. They believed the coalition was weakened and slow to recover. They were wrong. Veltir stepped forward, addressing the gathered troops. Her voice carried clearly. They believe we are broken, she said. They believe the fall of armor means the fall of will. They do not understand humanity. She turned slightly and looked at Elias. They do not understand refusal. Coalition forces moved with renewed purpose. Human units took point, supported by alien allies. Engineers worked alongside soldiers, modifying weapons and defenses without waiting for permission. Old rules were ignored when they no longer made sense. Elias was pulled into a planning group despite his protests. I'm just an engineer, he said. Yes, Veltir replied, and that is why you are needed. The plan was simple and very human. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they would let the enemy advance into prepared zones filled with traps, broken terrain, and hidden fire. No perfect formations, no clean lines. Just adaptability. When the enemy attacked, they expected resistance. They did not expect chaos. As enemy units entered the valley, the ground shifted beneath them. Explosives buried under rubble detonated, not to destroy, but to break formation. Coalition fire came from unexpected angles. Human drones swarmed, jamming sensors and feeding false data. Veltir moved through the fight like a storm. Her armor no longer followed strict energy rules. It pushed when needed and pulled back when necessary. Damage that would have shut it down before was absorbed and redirected. Enemy commanders watched in confusion as units fell apart. They adjusted tactics again and again, but each time humanity adapted faster. At one point, a massive enemy command walker advanced toward the center of the valley, its weapons tearing through defensive lines. Coalition forces struggled to slow it. Veltir stepped forward alone. Wait, Elias shouted from behind cover. That thing's too big. She did not stop. Then it will fall harder. The walker fired. Energy slammed into her armor, driving her back, cracking plates and sending warnings across her vision. The armor screamed for shutdown. She ignored it. Elias watched in horror as she forced the armor to keep going. He knew exactly how unstable it was. One mistake and it would fail completely. But then he saw what the armor was doing. It was not fighting the damage. It was adapting to it. Energy flowed differently, spreading impact across every system instead of focusing it in one place. Human redundancy, layered and messy, saved it again and again. Veltir reached the walker's leg and struck with everything she had. The joint shattered. The massive machine collapsed, its fall shaking the valley. Coalition fire finished it. A roar went up from the troops. Not of victory, but of belief. The enemy began to withdraw, not in order, not with pride, but with urgency. They had lost too much. The battle was no longer worth the cost. As the last enemy signals faded, the valley fell quiet once more. This time, the silence felt different. Veltir stood still, armor dimming as systems cooled. Elias ran to her side, breathless. "You pushed it too far," he said. "That armor shouldn't still be working." "It learned," she replied. "From you." Medical teams rushed in, but Veltir waved them away. She turned to the gathered commanders. "The battle is over," she said, "but the lesson is not." The coalition listened. "Humanity does not see failure as the end," she continued. "They see it as a problem to be solved. They rebuild what is broken. They fight with what they have, not what tradition demands." She placed a hand on her armor. "This is no longer just my armor, it is proof." The commanders exchanged looks. Slowly, one of them spoke. "We will study this." Elias sighed. "Please don't explode anything important." A few quiet laughs moved through the crowd. Days passed. Repairs continued. The wounded healed. The enemy did not return. Veltir spent much of that time with Elias, explaining her people's ways while learning more about his. They were different in almost every way, yet strangely aligned. One evening, as the sun set over the repaired camp, Elias packed his tools. "So," he said, "what happens now?" Veltir looked out at the horizon. "Now I return to my people." He nodded, figured. She turned to him. "You will not be forgotten." He waved a hand. "Just doing my job." "That," she said firmly, "is what makes it matter." A transport arrived to take her away. As she stepped aboard, she paused and looked back at him. "Human," she said, using the word with respect, "if your people ever call, mine will answer." He smiled. "Same goes." The transport lifted into the sky, carrying Veltir and her changed armor toward a future no one had planned. Elias watched until it vanished, then turned back to the camp. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Across the galaxy, stories spread, of a battle lost and reclaimed, of armor rebuilt from wreckage, of a species that refused to accept defeat. And wherever those stories reached, one truth followed them.